Hello everybody and welcome to a special holiday episode of Radiorama, where I show you how to work on radios and radio-based electronics from the 1920s through about the 1960s. And today I'm going to start a restoration in reverse. This is a model unknown Sylvania 5-tube All-American 5 set. I'm guessing it's probably from the early 50s. And well, actually, there's a way to tell. It's kind of hard to see in here, but it does have a triangle. Post 1955, because that is the Civil Defense mark. And what I'm going to do, as I sit here in front of the fire, is polish the case using Novus No. 2 plastic polish with an old sock and an old t-shirt. So tomorrow I will get into the electronics, but in the meantime, again, I'm just going to sit here and polish away. Alright, well, I've finished polishing this set. Been sitting here for about maybe an hour or so polishing that. Am I exaggerating? My wife says no, I'm not exaggerating. Anyway, tomorrow we will take out the chassis and do a test to see what's going on with it, and hopefully we'll be able to at least make it work as nicely as it looks. Alright, welcome to day 2 working on the cherry red Sylvania radio, and giving it a test here. It's actually already plugged in, and already I can see we have a problem here. This is a Telecron clock movement, and if it were working, that second hand would be continuously sweeping. Now I can hear a slight buzz, which indicates the surrounding magnet that goes around the rotor drum is fine. This is a pretty classic problem that I have with Telecron clocks, especially if they've been sitting for a real long time. There's a sealed copper rotor that's in the clockwork mechanism, and you can remove that, heat it up, and put new grease in it. The radio itself also does not work. I'm letting it warm up here, but it's got AC hum, which means the filter capacitors are shot, which is not at all uncommon. It's very common on sets of this age. Actually, it still kind of works. Those the electrolytics in it are on their very, very, very last legs, so that's good. This will be a pretty easy set to do. And also, I don't think that is not the original knob. I mean, it looks okay, but unless the shaft is damaged, then I'm going to replace it with the correct. It should probably be like a clear or a red clock radio knob, and I have a whole bunch of those sitting around. Let's see here. It's kind of hard to read the text here. It looks like a typical 5-tube set. It's hard to read. 35W4 for the rectifier, 35C5, or is it 50C5? I'm having a hard time reading that. Anyway, generic 5-tube set, and it's held in with 2 screws, and the speaker may or may not be attached to the chassis. So I'm going to pull it out, and probably the clock is going to have some sort of umbilical cord attaching it to the radio chassis. So I'm going to remove this screw first, and we'll see how that's held together, and then we'll take the chassis out. Alright, well, it appears that the clock and the chassis are all one, as well as the speaker. This is my kind of radio where the engineers were like, how can we make it easy for people to work on? Well, this is how you do it. You put everything on the chassis together instead of having everything plugged together. So I'm going to take the knobs off, pull these 2 1/4-inch screws, or bolts, or whatever you call them, and take a look underneath. I get a suspicious feeling this has probably never been worked on. Well, my suspicions were correct. This has never been worked on before. This is all 100% factory original. Here's our set of electrolytics. There are 2 of them. 2 40 microfarad capacitors, and of course the black wire is the common shared negative. It is a true floating chassis. It's not a hot chassis where one end of the line goes directly to chassis ground. Instead, it's going through this .047 rated cap. which, as I've described in previous videos, is the incorrect cap type and value. This is called a bumblebee cap. It's a .047 rated cap, and it has burst. It has exploded. This is probably the across the line cap. And what I've found with these bumblebee caps, if they get any moisture in them at all, that can cause some corrosion, and then sometimes they'll fail spectacularly. That might be one of the main reasons I'm getting such a loud buzz, even though this does need to be replaced anyway, both of these. So what I'm going to do first is replace these two guys and give it a test to see if I've restored radio operation. And then there's not much else to replace in here. There's like just a handful of parts. This will have to be replaced with a .01 cross the line cap rated for basically it's a cap that'll guarantee to fail open, which is critical, and it's also going to bring our current potential to the chassis down to a much lower level than this cap allows. Okay, so we have the two electrolytics replaced and that busted up cap. So I'm going to go ahead and give her a test fire, see if we have restored radio operations. I guess I need to turn it on. I can't tell which is on. Maybe that's on. Let's see. Nope, no tubes. Come on now, this is embarrassing. Does that work? Alright, it's on. I couldn't see any of the tubes glowing, but we'll find out soon. The controls are a little bit dirty.
Entered the world without a father. Llama 650-245.
Clearly got some dirt and stuff that's collected in my tuning condenser. It's kind of getting frazzled in some sections. Plus my volume control's dirty. Plus the tube sockets are dirty. But never the mind about that. I'm going to replace these last three. Again, this one is critical. That needs to be on one of these guys. X2, Y2 across the line cap. And then we have two more caps. Looks like .047, and then this guy, which is hard to read because it's coated in wax. .022. Alright, so replace these three, and then I'm going to clean the pot and clean the tuning condenser, see if that improves things a little bit. Okay, so we got the set fully recapped, and now what I'm going to do is clean the volume pot. First I'm going to get my beer out of the way because I don't want to squirt stuff in there accidentally. There we go. A little deoxit worked in there. That's probably good enough. Then the top here, let me see what's going on. Seems pretty clean. Sometimes I'll just get a soft paintbrush and run it down to the fence to make sure everything is not touching. Make sure there's nothing bent, which there is not. Just going to wiggle the tubes in their tube sockets just to temporarily clean their contacts a little bit. So let's go ahead and plug it in again and see if we have any improvement here. I can tell it's on because I see the filaments. Now another thing too is like when I touch that shaft, because I don't have a knob, I am going to cause interference with the signal. So I'm going to use my shirt sleeve, which is the proper tool you need to use in these sort of situations. Alright, warm up. Ah, it's warmed up. Alright.
Alex Rodriguez. It's Henry. No. Oh, you They knew they cheated.
I don't know about you, but it seems like the alignment's off a little bit. Either that or I've got a weak tube. Anyway, let me get my appropriate all-metal adjustment tool, screwdriver. And I know you guys are like, no, you have to use plastic. Correct, but I lost mine.
Merry Christmas from all of us. Did the same thing. Even though you have code sometime, yes. We poll. 66% of Democrats believe the Russians changed vote tally. One more time. She started voting for bonds and hired many of the Jews up saying Jesus is the savior.
Deal about it, but then she'd leave it there and would.
It's okay. I mean, it's probably not that great of a radio to begin with, but there's a little bit of... I tell you what, some of these radios react very harshly to my LED lights in here, and this one is no different. Oh, Jesus Christ, I burnt the crap out of myself in that tube. This is the probably a 12 AT6, but nevertheless it is missing its tube shield, which could also cause a little bit of a problem. No, it's a 12 BA6. So I'll try to find a tube shield for that. I'm going to go ahead and test the tubes because just want to make sure that they don't have anything to do with the interference issues, even though I don't think it is. I think, again, it's probably my LED lights, which are wonderful, but good God, does it make radio reception sometimes a bitch. Alright, well, I found the problem for the weird reception issues. This is a 3-section tube, 12 AT6, and 2 of its 3 sections tested like barely good. And so now this seems to have increased the sensitivity quite a bit.
In August? No. What is the big deal?
Because they're going to...
Yeah, that's much better. I might tweak these cans a little bit just before I call the radio section good, but otherwise I'm just going to clean the chassis up a little bit, and I need to address the clock situation. And I'm looking here and I'm like, how do they... I really hope that this back of this clock is not seriously held in with staples. Let me turn it off. How is this held on? This thing is put together in a very weird way. It looks like the clock mechanism is held onto the chassis by these little fingers that are bent. I'm not sure if this is showing up in the camera. But you got to take a pair of needle nose pliers and squeeze these guys together. And there's these 2 clips here that hold the top together. I've never seen this before. This is kind of fascinating. Usually these clock radios are pretty much a cinch, but I don't know what's going on here. We'll find out. Alright, that wasn't too bad. I managed to get it off without too much trouble. But this copper thing, that's our problem. That is the rotor. And these telecom movements are simple but pretty ingenious. The way it works is there's an electromagnet that goes around this drum. And those drums basically are sending essentially a magnetic signal to a rotor that spins inside this drum. It's completely hermetically sealed, and that drives the clockwork mechanism. So these guys are super, super insanely reliable. In fact, I have about 3 or 4 of these clocks in my house, and they're all at least 60 years old, and they don't lose a second. Like, they're very accurate. So the way that you take the drum out is you remove these two screws, and there's these little spacers with fingers on them, and the fingers point inward down towards the drum, the top of the drum. And so you want to take those both out, and then this will lift off, and then we should get the rotor out by itself, and then we'll go to the next phase, which is rejuvenating it with some new fresh oil. All right, so here's the rotor removed. You see it just got clasps in between these two guys, and this is the hardware that holds it in. You've got these little spacers with little fingers that come down, and they press down on the rotor, and then these two screws go down through the top. That's the spacer between this and the back plate of the clock movement. And this is the problem here. If these are working right, you should hear like a little bit of a rattle. I mean, there's a tiny amount, but if I'm doing this, it should be like, but all I hear is, it's frozen. So what you have to do with these guys is, well, I've come up with a weird little fix for these. And it involves putting a plastic tube on the rotor output shaft, some oil, and some heat. So I'll show you how that works. Alright, so here is my weird little solution. I have a piece of clear plastic gas tubing, like, you know, the stuff you get for motorcycles, lawnmowers, and stuff like that. And it just very securely squeezes over the output shaft. And then what I do is I sit here with my soldering iron and just patiently wait for this whole thing to get really warm. I'm not going to film doing that because it's boring. But what we're looking for is to see if we can get the oil in this tube to start boiling. And what it is, it's a combination of a little bit of fine machine oil and just a little bit of WD-40. And so anyway, when it starts boiling, that'll all mix up. And when you get it boiling for quite a while, you quit doing it and then let it cool down. And as it cools down, it's going to start pulling the oil into the rotor, and that should help free up the frozen rotor. Okay, so you see how it's bubbling like a Christmas light? Well, bubble lights anyway. This is what you want to see. You don't want to get too close to the plastic tube. You don't want to melt it, but you just want to make sure that you just push as much air as you can out of this rotor. Because again, when it cools down, what is it going to do? It's going to essentially contract, and it's going to pull this new oil in and re-lubricate it. Alright, so this has been cooling for a little bit, and what I do is I put a little mark on the plastic tube to indicate where the oil was when I started. And we can see it's starting to really suck down a lot of the oil. I'll probably leave it until tomorrow, and then I'll reassemble the rotor into the clock mechanism. Meanwhile, I use a little light machine oil to lubricate the movement here. The idea is that you want it to be as quiet as possible, because if this is sitting on someone's bedstand, you don't want to hear the sound of like grinding gears for sure. So I think I'm going to also what I did is I cleaned up the chassis, and boy, it looks like this thing was just kept somewhere clean and dry all its life, because the metal is in perfect shape. There's no discoloration, there's no rust, there's no nothing. So someone took really good care of this guy. Anyway, so tomorrow we will pick off from where we left off with the rotor, and see you tomorrow. Alright, welcome to day 2 of working on the Sylvania radio, and this is the result after having had this rotor cool down. You can see I made a mark on the side here, and it sucked down about 1/4 of that oil, so we're done with that. Clean that out. Not sure if you can hear that. That's the sound you should get. Now sometimes it won't work. Sometimes it'll still be frozen, and at that point I've got a bunch of extra rotors sitting around, but I'm going to put it back into the movement and see if that fixed our problem. Okay, well apparently we do have success here. I've successfully put the rotor back into service, and we can see the output shaft is spinning. I know it moves pretty slowly, but our second hand is now moving. and it's super quiet, which is important. You know, if these guys are going to sit on someone's bedstand, the last thing you want is some sort of humming, buzzing thing going on while you're trying to sleep. So I'm going to put the case back together, and then I'm going to proceed with adding the oh-so-famous audio input feature. Alright, so here is the last part of the electrical restoration process. I'm going to add an audio input feature, which means being able to plug in an audio device to a 3.5 millimeter stereo cable that'll come out of the back, and we're going to do so by running it through something called an isolation transformer. And all it is just a transformer that has a high amount of voltage coming in and a small amount of voltage coming out. This one is, I believe, 220 in and 24 volts out. I've been using 120 in and 12 volts out, but I keep on forgetting to bring some of those back from the shop. And then your audio signal, of course, we have a right and a left channel that comes into there, and those get split through a pair of, it doesn't really matter, 100, 90, whatever ohm resistors. Right and left channel goes on either end, and then that feeds into, these two are paired together, and that gives us our true mono mixing, and that goes to the volume pot, and then we need a switch that will switch the IF signal off. So here's the volume pot, and what I usually do is I look for what lead goes to the first IF can, which is this guy, and it's green wire. So this is the top of the pot, this is the bottom of the pot. The bottom of the pot probably goes to a negative somewhere. It looks like there's a bunch of negatives that are tying into there, and that probably eventually goes back to the shared common ground. And this is the center. We won't use that. But what we need to do is make sure and cut the IF signal. And what I do is I'll cut that wire off and see if the radio signal is indeed killed. Because then if that's the case, then we know we've succeeded in killing the IF. That we'll need to do so in order to add this switch wire in, so that we can reconnect the IF to restore radio functionality when the user doesn't want to listen to music or whatever it is they're listening to through their audio input device. It's kind of key to keep your leads as short as possible when it comes to the switch wire. The longer you make it, the more it could possibly act like a little bit of an antenna. So I'm probably going to run it like directly out to this back ear. That's not too far. And then the audio cable, that might be able to come in through one of these existing holes, which would be good because it's a stamped hole, which means it doesn't have any rough edges. So we'll do that, and I usually install these by roughing up both this and the mounting surface, which is going to be here, and use some super glue to glue it into place. And I usually clean the surface with a little rubbing alcohol in case I got some contact cleaner on it, which would make things not stick as well. Okay, so I've disconnected the IF wire, which was going to the top of the pot, and with it out of circuit, this is cranked all the way. It's pretty quiet. That's what you want. So that means when you run the audio through, you won't be interrupted by the radio signal. So all I'm going to do is attach probably a switch between those two, and again run it as quickly as I can out of the chassis, preferably away from any of these transformers, because the more you get near anything that's picking up a signal or contributing to generating that signal, you're going to pollute the switch line. You see, I can even get my hands near this, and I can affect the sound. So anyway, I don't recommend that you do that, by the way. No. But anyway, now it's time to run the audio signal from the isolation transformer to the top of the pot, which is basically these two guys. I put a resistor that's half the value of the volume pot and a 0.02 cap on the end. And what that does is that will prevent this transformer from interfering into the set's AGC system, which is, I believe, stands for your automatic gain control. And if you screw around with that, then you're going to get some potential oscillation, especially if you turn up the volume when you turn the radio back on. We kind of accidentally discovered that over time. We used to just run the lines directly in from the transformer, but about 20-30% of the time it'd mess up the AGC, so we decided to just do this automatically. It's easy. It's like half half of a penny's worth of parts. And so now I'll wire this up and put the switch in the back. And then we should be able to port music or switch it back to radio. Okay, so the system is installed. Our isolation transformer installed. And what I did, I try to keep my leads going from the primary side of the isolation transformer as short as possible. Likewise with the audio cable line, I tied a knot in the end and also put a little glue here so if anyone yanks on it, they're not going to chafe the cord. And we've got our line that goes from the IF transformer to the top of the volume pot. And again, these leads are as short as I can make them. Before I put it back in the case, I'll probably glob a little glue over that because if that ever comes loose, I don't want it to bang into anything. But anyway, we've got it playing. I bought one of these nifty little Bluetooth things, and that allows me to control my phone and my big stereo system at the same time without having to switch back and forth all the time. So I've got this plugged into the radio. I think I've got the radio section turned off. See? Radio signal turned off. Radio signal turned off. So you can do both, radio and audio. It's actually got a pretty good sound. Alright, so I'm going to button it up, put it in the case, and this one will be in the can. Alrighty. It's almost back together, but one last thing is I want to put a clock radio knob in it. It doesn't look ridiculous. Like I only have about 5,000 billion radio knobs. That one's red. That would look pretty good, wouldn't it? Let's see. It ain't gonna fit. Anyway, I'm gonna dig through here and see if I've got anything. It's either got to be white. I got black numbers. It could be black or red. So we got many options here. All right, everybody. I got this set back together again. I found a knob that works with it. Matches the plastic. And I've been having it play here a little while on my Bluetooth thingamabob. Been trying to play some Christmas music since it's getting close to being Christmas around here. There we go. Pretty proud of how this one turned out. I mean, it's very iconic. It's in great shape. And it even sounds pretty good. It was a pain to clean up all the crap in his little grill here, but I think it was worth it. Anyway, hope that you and your family and your loved ones, friends, and neighbors are all having a good, festive holiday season, no matter where you live. And I guess I'll probably see you guys maybe a little before or maybe after the holiday. And so everyone have a great time. And until the next time a radio comes across my workbench, see you next time.